All right, here we go. Now look, it looks like the same problem we just did, isn't it? Well, it is. It's exactly the same problem we just did, but I'm going to show you how to do it a different way. All right, so let's see if we can do this. Now I'm not going to give a whole lot of explanations on why we're doing what we're doing. Just kind of follow the steps, right? So first thing we're going to do is we're going to take this first coefficient and that constant right there, okay, the two n numbers, and we're going to multiply them together. Again, don't worry about why. I don't even know if I could explain to you why, to tell you the truth. That's why I'm not going to explain it to you. All right. So we're going to multiply those together. So if you multiply those together, you get, and make sure you include the sign. So yeah, so 6 times -5. I'm going to show you the steps so you know why we're, or at least what we're doing. Okay. 6 times -5 is -30. All right. Now that -30 is important. What I want to do is kind of like what you did last night. Remember how you took the outside and inside? You said what multiplies to be the last terms and adds up to be the middle one. Do you remember that? It's kind of the same deal. So what multiplies to be -30 and also adds up to be -7? All right. Does 6 and -5 add up to be -7? No, but it multiplies to be -30. Give me another number that multiplies to be -30 and adds up to be this middle one right here, -7. Judah, say it. -10 and what? And 3. Now, would you agree that that's -30, correct? Just like 6 times -5 was -30. But -10 and 3 also do what? They add up to be what? -7, which is my middle number right there, isn't it? So that's what you want to do. First thing you do is you multiply the two last numbers together, right? And you get this. So you can kind of forget this now, all right? So I want to take a look at -30 and say what multiplies to be -30 and adds up to be -7. And you said -10 and 3. Does it? Sure. It multiplies to be -30, adds up to be -7. That's what I want to choose. Now that -10 and that +3 are going to help us out. What we're going to do, instead of writing it as -7x, I'm going to write it as -10x plus 3x. So watch, I'm going to rewrite this. I'll keep the first term and the last term the same. It's that middle one right here. I'm going to change that from -7x to what it adds up to be. All right, so I have a -10x. What else do I have? A plus 3x, and then I put a -5 here. Notice what I've done. All I've done was taken these two, and it adds up to -7x. Would you agree that this problem right here is exactly the same as this problem right here? Yeah, I just took that -7 and split it up into -10 plus 3. How did I know to use -10 plus 3? Well, it's because it's a number that multiplies to be -30 and also adds up to be -7. Do you see that? That's why I multiplied 6 and -5 together, because I wanted to find a number that multiplies to be -30 and adds up to be this thing right here. Why did I care that it adds up to be -7? Because I wanted to split it up like this. All right. So instead of -7x, it's -10x plus 3x. All right. Sometimes I over explain, but that's what we do. Now, how in the world does that help you? Well, this kind of looks like a problem that we did earlier, one of the very first factorings we did. Not the greatest common factor, but what was after that? We factored by grouping. That's right. So watch what I can do now. Watch. I can take this, group that together, then I can take this, group that together. And you're looking at it right now and you're probably thinking, well, wait a minute, nothing's even in common with these two. But you're going to see something here in a second. So watch, let's do this by grouping. So this is now, at this point, this is something that we have done before. Okay, we've already learned how to factor by grouping, correct? So let's go through it. Look at 6x squared and -10x. What's in common with both of those? What's in common with 6 and 10? 2. What about x squared and x? There's an x in common. So let's factor that out from that first parentheses. Now remember, when I say I factor it out, I'm dividing it by this, correct? So 6 divided by 2 is 3. And then x squared divided by x is just x. Put the minus sign. Now let's find out how many times 2x goes into this. So again, 10 over 5, or 2 is 5. X over x is just 1. You see that? Now, do you see this thing right here? Now nothing is in common with this, is there? Right, there's just a 1 that's in common with both of these, greatest common factor. So it's kind of like a 1 right there, right? Now, what do we have? Look at this term And then look at this term. What do I have in common with both of those? A 3x minus 5. You see that? And then what's left over? If I take this out of this, what do I have? A 2x plus a 1. And there it is. Is that the same thing that we got earlier for our factoring? It is, isn't it? It's exactly what we got earlier. Does it work? Look, 3x times 2x is 6x squared, isn't it? The last term's negative 5 times positive 1. It's negative 5. Let's do the outside and inside. Outside is 3x minus 10x. What's 3x minus 10x? Negative 7x. And it works, doesn't it? That's the same answer that we got doing it the other way. But this way, we didn't do a whole lot of guessing, did we? All right, we had a series of steps that we went through. There's a little bit, I hate to call this guessing, but it's kind of a little bit of guessing right in here. Right? You just had to figure out in your head what numbers work. But that's the kind of stuff that you're used to. Now, it's a little bit of extra writing. It all depends. If you did it the other way, remember, and you guessed correctly the very first time, that would be a lot less work than this would be. Would you agree? But this way, right. But, you know, it depends on the problem. Sometimes you might try it 4 or 5 or 6 times, and it gets so frustrating and keep not getting it right, and then you're trying all these different options. It still doesn't work. It still doesn't work. You know, and then finally, you know, after 6 or 7 tries, you finally got it. That's frustrating. This way, you can get it first time every time. It's a little extra writing, but you get it right every single time like this, if you do it correctly. No, there's no 2 answers. This is your answer. I circled your answer. That's your answer, what I circled right here. This is this thing factored. Okay, these 2 things.
So that's the answer because it's factored completely.
Yeah, it's factored. Yeah, I mean completely. It's, you know, you should always factor completely, but it's factored. This is your answer. What I've circled right here is your answer. Okay, it's the same answer we got when we did it before. That's right. Okay, look at your notes before. It's the same exact numbers, right? If you took notes. All right, let's try that first problem that we did. All right, but let's try it the new way. All right, I don't even know I don't even know if there's a name for this particular way, but we'll just call it the new way. All right, so let's do another one. Okay, here it is. It's that first problem we did earlier, so we know what the answer is supposed to be, right? If you took notes on this. But I want to get it a different way. Instead of just guessing a whole bunch of things that work, let's see what we're going to do. What's the first thing we did? Multiply those the first number and the last number together. Okay, so 4 times 6 is what? It's 24. Now what I have to do, that 24 is important to me. I have to figure out what multiplies to be 24 and also adds up to be what? Negative 11. That's right. So I got to think of something that multiplies to be 24 and adds up to be negative 11. Good. 8 and 3 would work, right? Because negative 8 times what? Negative 3, right? You understand the signs? Because it has to multiply to be a positive 24 and has to add up to be a negative 11. So that does multiply to be a positive 24, and if I add them up, negative 8 plus negative 3 is negative 11. That's a good choice. Now, you had other choices, didn't you? You had 12 times 2, right? But is there any way to get 12 and 2 to get an 11 out of that? Or 6 times 4 again, like we did here, but again, 6 times 4, there's no way I can get a negative 11 out of that. Okay? So 8 and 3, right? What else? Is there anything else? That's it, isn't it? That's all the multiples, yeah. So that's everything that multiplies to be 24. So that's the numbers I'm going to pick, negative 8, negative 3. So instead of writing this as negative 11x, watch how I'm going to write it. I'm going to write 4x squared, what? Negative 8x minus what? 3x. See, there's your negative 11x, and then what? Plus 6. All right? So the first and the last stayed the same. All I did was change that negative 11x to negative 8x minus 3x. Now we do this by grouping. Now you got to be careful. When you got a minus sign in here, you're grouping, there's one little step. Do you remember that when we did that grouping? So watch. Let's group the first 2 like this. That's not a problem. I didn't change anything by doing that. But if I decide to put, now watch, this is a negative 3x plus 6, correct? And it has to stay negative 3x plus 6. I can't change the value of it. But if I just put a parentheses, you think, oh, putting parentheses around something doesn't change it. But that changes this, doesn't it? Now it's negative 3x what? Minus 6. Well, I don't want that. Yeah, let's change this sign to what? To negative 6. Now is it the same thing that we started with? Yeah, negative 3x, like I wanted it, right? And then I've got plus 6, like I wanted it. Do you see what I did? So when I put a parentheses around this, I had to be careful, and I had to take that plus out of it and make it a minus. And the reason I did that is because when I distribute this negative through here, now it's what we originally had, isn't it? All right, let's do this real quick. Let's do some factoring on this first parentheses right here. What's in common with both of those? 4x. All right, so if I factor out of 4x, I get just a 1x, and then put a minus. Factor out of 4x from this, or divide this by 4x, I get a 2. Good. Okay, put a minus here because of this, and then let's figure out, is there anything in common with this? On that other problem that we did, there was only a 1, but now there's a 3 in common, right? So let's figure out what's left over. If I divide this by a 3, I get an x. Divide this by 3, I get a 2. Check it out. Look. Now I got an x minus 2 in common with both of them, don't I? So now I'll factor out an x minus 2. What's left over? If I take an x minus 2 out of this term right here, what am I left with? A 4x. Okay, put a minus. If I take an x minus 2 out of this, what am I left with? A 3. There it is. Is that the same answer we got the first time we did this? All right? You had notes, right? It might have been it might have been 4x minus 3 times x minus 2, but still it's the same exact thing, isn't it? All right? So I don't know. It depends on what method you like. Do you like doing it this way? Or would you rather just guess a whole bunch of numbers and see what works? Yeah, some people like that. Some people would rather just guess the numbers and see what works. All right? And that's not a problem. That's fine. Sometimes you guess quick and easy, right? You get it right away, and you move on, and you go on to the next problem. This takes a little bit of work, but once you get the flow of this, once you get in the routine of doing this, it's not so bad. Jacob?
At the top, when you change the sign, right?
Yeah.
Can you just always do that?
Well, if it's a minus, you have to do it, okay? So if you have a minus right here, because if it was a plus and I put parentheses, that didn't change the value of it. But remember, it was originally a plus 6, right? But if I put a parentheses around this, what did the parentheses do? Well, it made me distribute this negative through. So it's a negative 3x, which is fine, okay? But then this becomes a negative 6. Well, it wasn't a negative 6 to begin with, was it? So I got to keep it. So when I distribute it, I got to make sure that it stays a positive 6. Does that make sense? So what I do, and you can do this, it's fine. You can just put a minus right there, because now this is negative 3x what? Plus 6. And it should be a plus 6. Okay with that? All right, so finish that worksheet and give this method a shot. All right? I mean, sometimes it's helpful, especially if you get stuck. If you get stuck the other way and you're like, oh, it won't work, or I've tried all these different things, oh, let's just go to this way and do it. All right? You may just want to start this way right off the bat. All right? Yeah, so I'd say sometimes it's more efficient. Okay? We'll say it that way. I don't know if it's easier or not, but it's more efficient anyway.
It takes more time, but
Yeah.
you could even that out if you guess a bunch of times.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, if you're doing it on a test, you can get a couple of them right off the bat, but the other ones takes a
Yep.
while to even out.
You're right. So, yeah, that's it.
And